lateral view, we're going from the more vertical vector of the multifidus now to a more frontal direction. So we have lowered ourselves down to be more horizontal in this fashion when we look at these more lateral structures, lateral muscles of the lumbar spine. And the significance of that is that not only will this muscle group contribute to posterior rotation of the lumbar spine, but particularly at L4 and L5, the more horizontal orientation will lend itself well to posterior translation. So let's take a hold of longissimus fibers and pull. And now instead of, at this orientation, instead of the spinous process dropping down, we're literally pulling the vertebrae backwards, creating posterior shear. And it is said that when looking at the longissimus, the lower fibers are going to contribute more to posterior translation. As we ascend in the longissimus orientation, it will contribute more to posterior rotation. Obviously can't do those separately, so part of those vectors are part of each fascicle's arrangement and function. But there will be a dominance of one versus the other depending on what level we're at. And then just moving our pipe cleaners back into place here. Now let's look at the red pipe cleaners representing the iliocostalis lumborum, pars lumborum. So these fascicles are going to come off the transverse process as well as 2 to 3 centimeters into the middle layer of the thoracolumbar fascia. So the attachment is not only to the more lateral tip of the transverse process, but also into the fascia itself, the thoracolumbar fascia. And the iliocostalis will then run in a same fascicular arrangement. So you're going to see at each level, if we were to just peel these off, you would see the fibers below. So these will be stacked in the same fashion. There is the absence of a ligament, L5. So technically the iliocostalis pars lumborum stops at L4. At L5, that is, in the neonate and young child, reckoned to be the iliolumbar muscle that does become collagenous as we age and becomes the iliolumbar ligament. So here again, if we look at the orientation of the iliocostalis fibers in this low orientation, there's two things distinctly different. One, it has distinct advantage being out on the tip of the transverse process to produce a rotation effect, more so than any of the other deep muscles of the lumbar spine. Still, it would pale in its effect in terms of rotating the trunk compared to the powerful oblique muscles, the prime movers for rotation. But like the multifidus, the iliocostalis could certainly check the flexion moment of the abdominals and help keep the trunk more upright in rotation movements. So the vector, again, is going to be one of both posterior rotation and at this lower level, predominantly more one of not just rotation, but more of a posterior shear. And when we think about the sacral promontory that creates the lordosis, that puts L5 in the most vulnerable posture to slip forward, this is just another mechanism that we are provided to enhance our stability for lordosis with this arrangement of these polysegmental muscles. So on the cadaveric dissections, and I've done several of these, and hopefully we'll have one for our teaching on litmos, that would be great, but in the meantime we'll make do with our pipe cleaners. These fossa are full of the multifidi. So L5, the multifidus coming off L5, is going to embed closer in, thicker, and it will attach itself and embed itself well down into the sacrum at this level. And then the more cephalad muscles of the multifidus, as I mentioned earlier, are going to attach more lateral. So again, if you can see the sacrum with the collagenous fascia removed, you then reveal the musculature that lays on the dorsal sacrum. Impressive anatomy to actually see on the cadaver. Okay, so I think with that we'll turn the spine laterally and see if we can get that appreciation of the orientation. Get everything all ready here. And now we'll try and go ahead and turn. See if we can bring it back into the screen a little bit, or at least I'll try. There we go. So I think now the vertical orientation of the multifidus becomes quite obvious, and again, well suited for posterior rotation as well as strong compression and creating or accentuating the lordosis, the multifidi. And then again, just noting the more forward inclination of our iliocostalis and longissimus fibers to help check anterior shear in this most vulnerable zone, L4 and L5, to check the